So now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Rachel Litonja-Witt. Since 1998, Rachel has been working with clients across industries to prepare and transition their organizations and workforce to become more responsive to changing business goals, technology solutions, and organizational structure through the development and execution of strategic change management and training programs. So without further ado, Rachel, I will go ahead and turn today's session over to you.
Thank you, Kayla. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Kayla mentioned, we're going to take a few minutes today to talk about how you can capitalize on organizational change to create a better workforce. And there are many ways you can approach this, and our focus today will really focus on, will focus on the concept of an agile workforce and what does that mean? What do I need to do to begin to develop an agile workforce, both internally and engaging external agile workforce resources? So before we start talking about an agile workforce, let's look at some of the drivers that are making this need to reevaluate what our workforce looks like in today's market. And more we're seeing there's a greater drive to be customer-centric in our focus and how we do work. Because of technology, our customers, are much more prepared with information in terms of what they want, their background of what services we can provide, how quickly we should be able to provide that. So instead of now customers being more at the mercy, if you will, of organizations and how long it takes us to do work, the reverse has come into play. Organizations now need to be much more responsive to our clients. And why is that? Because there is much greater global and even micro competition. That global competition has resulted in a lot of acquisitions and mergers, as we've seen, meaning now that we've got multiple organizations with diverse workforces, diverse technologies, diverse approaches that now need to integrate. And now when we talk about micro competition, we start looking at those startup companies, those independent contractors and consultants who can fill the niches that in one sense, we're too small for larger organizations to fill, but by the same token, begin to eat away at opportunities that we have. Changing technology makes it much easier to accomplish the same work what we've done in the past, whether that's compliance work, fulfilling regulation requirements, whether that is going to market much quicker, completing our contracts, fulfilling our orders, providing our services. All of this has resulted in compressed business cycles. Instead of taking a month to complete a client order or deliver services, now that may be just a week or two. How does that all then impact our organizational change and our structures? Well, if we take a look at it, typically many organizations still retain that organizational traditional structure. You have distinct departments with distinct jobs, distinct resources. There's not necessarily a lot of collaboration going on versus the more nimble or agile organizations where you may have a smaller group in your workforce. Everyone learns a little bit more about what others are doing, and while they may not be able to execute or perform all of the transactions or activities, they understand the workings of what needs to get done, how quickly we can collaborate to meet the client's needs. So where does the organizational change occur? Well, part of it is not only in the vision and goals of our organizations, but how we structure our workforce. So if I'd like you to consider today this concept of developing an agile workforce. And what do we mean by agile? There are two components to it. When we look at the agility of an organization, we're focusing on how do we get our work done and what is the behavior of our resources. When we talk about how do we get the work done, we focus on a strategic alignment concept of how do we simplify our processes without losing the quality of our work, the accuracy of our work, meeting the compliance requirements of our work. And as an example, not too long ago, when we used to sign contracts with clients, we would require a wet signature or an actual signature on documents. Well, that took time to route the documents, get them signed, get them FedExed or email or mailed back. And so that built an extension to the time it took us to be responsive to clients. Now, digital technology has enabled us to get the digital signatures completely legally binding, and we decrease the amount of time it takes us to move forward with our work. The second component of an Agile workforce is the resource behavior. Agile organizations tend to favor positive intent, meaning that all of our resources value contribution to the organization. What can they do to make it better? And the organization values the contribution each of their members can bring. This leads to a greater sense of ownership of success of the organization as opposed to just getting my work done for my specific job. An Agile workforce also then comprises multiple work models. It's not just our W-2 full-time or part-time resources. It may include what's becoming more and more popular as contract employees, people who, get the benefit of being a W-2 but for a very finite period of time, to engaging our consultant resources, our organizations that bring in continuous service, quality service, but also now looking at our independent consultants for those high profile or immediate need initiatives and determining what's the right balance, because an organization cannot truly be agile in all of its functions. There are certain functions, especially in the finance components of organizations, where you may need to maintain some of that traditional structure. So if we take a look at, well, okay, Rachel, this concept of an Agile workforce sounds a little interesting. How do I develop my own resources that I have today to become more Agile? Well, part of it is a mindset from the top down, from the executive sponsorship leadership level down through middle management, down to even the supervisory and employee level. And the focus is now on employment security versus job security. Yes, we are all hired to perform a particular job with a particular set of responsibilities and skills needed to do that. But from an Agile workforce perspective, we need to look beyond that specific job and look at the operations of the entire organization and how can we make best use of the resources we have to fulfill the needs of our organization. And to do that, it requires some of the standard change management practice activities of communication and engage. And when we say communicate, we talk about communication at all levels, from your sponsorship, executive, corporate leadership level, to your middle management, to your supervisors, to your employees. And that communication, while the overall theme may be the same, the communication to each of your stakeholder groups needs to be different. It needs to engage your audience to understand what we call the WIFMs, the what's in it for me. How does this overarching goal to build an Agile workforce to be a much more competitive and viable organization, how does that apply to me in my workspace, and then roll up to the next level of the organization, whether it's just a department or a domestic pillar within the U.S., or if they're part of a global organization. The engagement piece includes not just providing the communication, but having the open ears to receive the feedback and be genuine about it, that you're really interested in understanding how people, from their perspective, how your resources, from their perspective, where they sit in the organization, what ideas they have that help the organization, possibly help the organization achieve its goals. The next piece in developing an agile workforce is determining truly what are your work requirements, not just from what tasks need to be done within a business cycle, but what are the skills that we would like our resources to have, or what do they need to have to get the work done at a minimum? What are the nice to haves to allow us to expand and build on our workforce? And this results in balancing the generalist versus special focused resource. Everyone cannot be a specialist in the organization for the organization to function optimally. There needs to be a level of generalist knowledge and skills so that people understand the bigger picture, understand what it takes from a collaborative effort to make the organization run effectively. And part of that generalist mindset is a willingness to step out of the predetermined box or job that you've been assigned and take the risk to look at where's my interest, where can I make other contributions. And consequently then, organizations need to continually build the skills of their resources. How and when that occurs will vary based on the organization, but the idea is to build up your skills within your Agile workforce so that those skills are transferable across jobs, across departments, across agencies within your organization. And lastly, as you're building the skills and enabling your resources to do more than what they're currently doing, is to provide them the opportunities to apply those skills, whether those are projects, whether those are company-wide initiatives. How can they apply what they're learning today, what they do in their job today, to other activities that expand their experience? And then the last piece there is innovation. We as organizations need to be willing to take some risk or allow our resources to take risk to try out new ways of doing the work we do. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be a long, drawn-out process. You may have heard the term fail fast. And you're saying fail fast. Well, it has a slightly negative connotation, but what that really means is to give your resources or your organization opportunities to try new things, to try different processes, and to do them in a relatively quickly manner. Let's identify our new approach. What do we need to do? Who do we need to engage? Let's try it for a defined period of time and evaluate. If it doesn't work, we realize it doesn't work. What were the lessons learned that we take away from that from the next time we try a new way to provide services or produce our materials for our clients? When we look at our Agile workforce, we need to not only look internally, but also look externally. Recent studies have shown that up to 35% of the U.S. workforce are independent resources, whether those are independent contractors or small businesses comprised of one or two resources. That is a huge amount of untapped experience and skill that more and more organizations are looking to fill their needs for specific initiatives. When we look at engaging our external Agile resources, we need to understand those resources bring with them a vast experience across industries, across functional areas, across technologies that is incumbent on us to draw upon to make sure that our investment in these resources and the investment we put into our initiatives meet our requirements and are as successful as possible. But to do this, we need to make sure we take the time to select the best resources. Many of us have realized and experienced firsthand how external resources look really good on paper, and they may even sound really good when we do the interview. But when you bring them on board and feet hit the ground, the proof is in the pudding whether or not we did an accurate or a substantial amount of vetting to make sure that we got the right resources in place. And then when we look at engaging our external Agile workforce resources, we want to make sure we set them up for success within our organization. And there are 3 points of critical alignment that need to occur when we engage external resources. And part of that alignment is first the strategy. Do we include them and make them part of our organization so they don't feel like they're just an extra set of hands, but that they have skin in the game, or that we value the experience they bring to help us make the right decisions, or at least give us food for thought when we're looking at making decisions? Do they understand what our goal is? What's the purpose of what we're doing? Both from a technology standpoint, from a business standpoint, from a business process standpoint. The second critical alignment is around performance of our external resources. Do they understand what is required of them, both from a deliverable standpoint, service or goods deliverables, from a quality standpoint, from an accountability standpoint, from a performance timeline standpoint? And the final critical alignment is that building of the relationship. We want to make sure we take advantage of our external Agile resources to say, you've worked in this industry across multiple companies for X period of time, you tell us. What are the lessons learned? Are we going to repeat or encounter problems that you've seen in other organizations? How did they deal with that? So we want to take advantage of our external Agile resources to help us not experience the same mistakes that were done earlier, or to help us learn from their experience as we move forward. So a couple of key takeaways from this short conversation we're having this morning are to understand that today's market challenges that drive our organizational changes include a greater customer-centric focus, technology-enabled compressed business cycles, and global and micro competition, whether that is through global competition uniquely from different companies, mergers or acquisitions, and even now from our startup organizations. When we look at the concept of an Agile workforce, truly what we're looking at is developing a process or reviewing how do we do our work and what is the behavior of our resources that enable us to most effectively and efficiently execute on that work. And when you start to look at how do you develop that Agile workforce internally, the focus is at a much more macro level. Employment security versus job security. Skills development and transferability versus just doing a specific set of tasks. And then when we look at engaging this external Agile workforce, which conceivably could be up to 30% of the U.S. workforce, we want to make sure we take the time to plan accordingly to align these resources from a strategic goal, focus, performance, so they understand what's expected of them, what they can expect from us, and then begin to nurture that relationship so that for the time they are with us, they truly feel that they are part of our organization and can contribute to the success and take ownership of the success that we are engaging them for. Kayla, that takes care of the topics I wanted to cover today.
Well, thank you. That 20 minutes just flies by, but thank you for the great discussion and kind of getting us all thinking today. We do have, well, we went over by about a minute. I'd like to take a few minutes, though, to go over some of the questions that came in. So if you do have a question for Rachel, be sure to enter it into the Q&A module at this time. Obviously, we've covered a lot in 20 minutes, and there's still more information that we can discuss. So I encourage you to continue the conversation with Rachel beyond today's session. Her contact information is available in today's slide deck, and we'll be sending everybody a link to a follow-up blog post where she'll be addressing some of today's key takeaways. Rachel, if you have a second, if you go ahead and flip it to that last slide, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to see your, there we go, there's your contact info. And also as a reminder, the recording and slides from today will be emailed to the email address that you registered with for today. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first question that came in. How do we get our organization to move towards an agile workforce? What you said today made sense, but it's not our organizational structure now. So are there any tips or tricks that you can share with us on where we can get started to move in that direction?
Yes. Typically, if your organization has what we call the traditional structure, where you're very siloed or you have very distinct functions and leadership within those functions, it may be that you need to take an initiative that's coming up, and as you're planning for these initiatives around the budgeting and staffing standpoint, is to begin to look at the approach we take and start small if you need to, whether it's a technology initiative or an organizational restructure initiative, and work with those leaders. You always need to start at a sponsorship level, because it's with that sponsorship that there is the perceived backing of the organization's leadership, so people are more willing to take the risks and be a little more forthcoming with ideas. So you may need to start at small, but it also, again, as I mentioned, the organizational leadership and sponsorship for an initiative or an opportunity to move to an agile workforce is critical.
Well, thank you, Rachel, for that. I see one question coming in, but oh, hold on one second. I see it being typed right now. What is the key to avoiding resistance?
Well, resistance will occur at various levels. There are some resources who only want to do what they were hired to do. So there will always be resistance. The best you can do is to make the case for why there is change occurring. What is the bottom line for the health of the organization, for the opportunity growth, for the resources within the organization, and that all needs to align with the organization's goals from both a financial revenue standpoint as well as a philosophical or growth standpoint. How you deal with resistance in the worst case scenario is you lay the cards out on the table and say, this is the direction we're heading. Here's where we want to have you engaged, and we want you to be part of where we're heading. But understand that some people, that's just too much for them to accept, and you will have resistors. And at some point in time, the organization will need to come to a decision. To what extent do we need to keep people who only want to do the jobs that they were hired to do versus moving towards an organization where people are much more willing to understand a little bit more beyond their comfort zone, to learn a little bit more, to become more engaged from a holistic standpoint in the organization's success.
Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming through, so we'll go ahead and start. Robbie, actually, we just had one more come in. We're about 5 minutes over, so what I'm going to do is we just had another question come in, but we'll go ahead and address that in the blog post just because I want to be mindful of everyone's time since we're 5 minutes over. And we'll address that in that follow-up blog post. So I want to say thank you again to today's speaker, and thank you to everyone who attended for your time and attention. We do hope that you'll join us again for more webinars. Our upcoming topics are on how to maximize your recruiting tools. We currently have an on-demand session that is actually, you're able to download that today. It's on converting Flash to HTML5. And coming up in September, we have another session on creating engaging MOOC experiences to drive behavior change. Registration for all of these webinars are available at gpstrategies.com under the tab Webinars. I wish everyone on the call a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Thank you.